Hey guys! So today I want to talk to you about something really great that happened recently that we should all be aware of because it's definitely positively impacting our field. And that is at the end of April 2024, the Federal Trade Commission issued a final ruling that bans non competes nationwide. So, unfortunately, that is something that we have been impacted by as behavior analysts. Actually, 1 in 5 Americans are impacted by non competes. So, banning non competes is really great for our field. It's great for business as a whole. It's going to be way less restrictive. So, I want to talk to you a little bit today about what that means for our field and what that means for you as a behavior analyst. So, first, let's talk about what are non compete agreements. You may have signed one. Maybe it was just part of your employment contracts and you didn't know about it, or maybe you knew about it and had to sign one anyways. But non complete agreements are clauses in your employment contract, which I highly recommend that you read your employment contracts line by line. Now, don't just sign them to start your new job, but this would be a clause in that contract that restricts employees from working for competitors or starting a similar business, or really just doing anything like that within the field, within a certain time frame and geographic location after leaving their current employer. So, the idea behind this is that it's supposed to protect the business interests and proprietary information and client relationships, because, of course, you don't want to have somebody that is working for you and then they just open up their own, shop next door and steal all of your business. That's really the intent behind it. But what they do in practice is you basically are signing that you can't work in the field of behavior analysts for 2 years within 50 miles of any of their locations. And I'm just throwing those numbers out there, but it really is things like that. It can be very, very impactful to us and to people in other fields as well, not just behavior analysts. This is really a nationwide issue. So when you sign that and you're stating you are not going to, work in the field of ABA, or you're not going to work within a certain geographic location after leaving your employer, you're kind of stuck with a couple of options. So, a lot of times people end up leaving their employer and getting lower paying work outside of the field that their career is in. Maybe they have to completely relocate to another city, but that's going to be difficult as we have a lot of nationwide companies out there, or leave the workforce altogether until that time frame is up. So then you're left stuck in this situation where either you're stuck working for a company that you absolutely don't want to be working for, and you're basically trapped there by this non compete, or you leave and either follow the agreement, which is negatively going to impact you, or don't follow the agreement, hoping that they don't notice, and then you can actually be taken to court for that as well. So it's really restrictive. It negatively impacts employees so much. It's not something that we want in our field. It's really, really great that they have banned these non-competes. It's just widespread. It's going to lead to keeping your wages low because you can't go and leave to another company that's paying you more. It can suppress new ideas. And it's also just really bad for the economy, keeping people stuck in positions that they don't want to be stuck in. So this is fantastic that this has been banned. But there are still other things that you can encounter that I want to talk about, and some stipulations to this banning as well that could impact some of you out there. So, one exception that's out there, which probably isn't going to apply to too many of you, is non competes for senior executives. So still nobody can get a new non-compete even if you're a senior executive, but if you have an existing non-compete and you qualify as a senior executive, then your existing non-compete is still in place. So that means somebody that's earning more than $151,000 a year and who are in a policy making position. So if you already have an existing non-compete and you're a senior level executive, then your non-compete is still going to be in place, but no new non-competes can be placed upon you. Now, for everybody else, even if you have a non-compete that was in your contract that you signed, it's now invalid. Nobody can take you to court for it. Nobody can enforce it. It's not going to stand up, legally for any reason. And then, of course, you will not get any new non-competes. And if you do, point this out to them that this is not acceptable. It has been banned. It is not legal, and it's not something that can be enforced any longer. Now, despite there not being any non-competes anymore, there are still a couple of other contracts that you can encounter as you're going into a new job, or maybe you've already signed them. My favorite situation is getting a new job and not having an employment contract, because really you should be working at the company that you're working for because you want to. And anytime you no longer want to work there, you should be able to give appropriate notice and leave. Really, anything outside of that, I feel, is violating your autonomy and your ability to decide what's best for you. And ultimately, in our field, it's going to negatively impact our staff and long term our clients. The idea of quiet quitting, where people are just doing the bare minimum to get by, while that can, have limited impact in other fields, doing that in the field of ABA is going to have a big impact on our clients. So we shouldn't want anybody to be in that situation where they feel they're just going to do the bare minimum, just get by because they can't get out otherwise. But some other things that you might encounter, which are still acceptable, these have not been banned, but one of them is a non-disclosure agreement or something similar to that. Basically, the purpose of a non-disclosure agreement is that you're not going to take proprietary information or sensitive information that's specific to that company and then take it and use it somewhere else or use it for profit or anything like that. Now, that does make sense to a degree to have something like that, especially if you're working at a company and maybe they have created their own supervision curriculum or they have their own method of doing things. They don't want you to take that information and steal it and go use it elsewhere, because it's their intellectual property. Now, I personally have encountered some similar agreement in a contract that I did not sign and a job I did not take, because, as I'm sure many of you know, as the owner of ABC Behavior Training, I create tons of resources and CEUs and everything like that. And there was an agreement in the contract that stated that anything I created while I was employed by them was their intellectual property, and I couldn't use it for profit or anything else, but they could take my information that I've created, regardless of if it was for that company or not, and they could use it. So essentially stealing my intellectual property. So that really pinpoints why it's so important to read your employment contracts, because if I didn't read it line by line, I wouldn't have noticed that. I would have signed it, and then anything I created while employed by them, they could have taken, all of my income from those resources. So definitely look at things. And also, that shouldn't really be the purpose of that non-disclosure agreement or the trade secrets. It shouldn't be to restrict your creativity and restrict your ability to create resources for our field. It should just be to keep, company proprietary information within that company and not getting out, which I don't think that's a big issue in our field, but there could be situations where that's relevant. Now, another thing that you can still encounter, and this one I completely understand, and I think it's actually in line with our ethics code, is a non-solicitation agreement. Now, a non-solicitation agreement should definitely be different than a non-compete. Even though there could have similar aspects in both of them, the purpose of the non-solicitation agreement, I think that this kind of covers what the non-compete tries to do, basically saying that you cannot solicit an employee, clients, customers, anything like that when you leave the organization. You can't take them with you. And that makes sense because, we don't want clients just moving around. Now, if a client finds out where you go and they make that choice to follow you, or the same with a staff member, there just needs to be no evidence that you solicited them away from the company. And this is to, protect the business, existing relationships, maintain its workforce stability so there's not constant turnover and people following people other places. Now, if it happens naturally, that's another thing. But the point is that you don't go and try and take everybody with you. Now, some enforcement of the non solicitation agreement, it can make it a little awkward when you're leaving a job because ideally, you're going to let your staff and your parents know where you're going. And then one of the first questions, just out of curiosity, is like, oh, where are you going to? Well, we can't tell them. Oftentimes in that non-solicitation agreement, you can't tell them where you're going because then they could potentially go and follow you to this new position and leave the existing company. And that could be an issue if you have a non solicitation agreement in your employment contract. So just be really aware of that if it's coming time to leave your job and you do have something in there. Thankfully, though, that is more reasonable and less restrictive on your ability to work than a non compete because you can still leave, you can still go work for a competitor. You just can't take all your clients and all of your staff with you. So I would say that this is a reasonable alternative that should still get that same benefit that companies are trying to get by utilizing the non-compete. So if you're in a position where you're leaving your current place of employment, I think it's important to work with management, work with your clinical director, and figure out what that script is so everybody can still know that you're leaving and that they know what you're telling clients and employees, and it can be a conversation. So it's planned together to avoid any sort of issues as you transition to a new role. Now, unfortunately, I've also seen situations where they don't want anybody to know that you're leaving until you're gone. And that I think is really bad for transitioning. It's bad for your client because they're going to have issues with this transition. That's difficult for the parents that they now don't know who their point of contact is. There's not any overlapping with the new BCBA that's taking your caseload. So that is not an ideal situation. There should be a plenty of notice for your families and your staff, and also plenty of notice for the company, and then that discussion on how this is going to get, that information is going to be given to families and employees to make sure that it's in line with your employment contract. Now, if you're a business owner, the idea that these non compete agreements have now been banned could be a little scary for you if you were relying on those to kind of keep your workforce together and make sure that your employees and your clients don't leave to other companies. And I understand that. I mean, it definitely is a tool that many companies out there used to keep their staff stable and not have people leave. But obviously, it has very negative effects. So think about it like a relationship. Do you want to be dating somebody who hates you and wants to get away from you? The same is true for our work relationships. If you have an employee that wants to leave, making them stay is not going to have any positive outlook. It's going to create a toxic work environment. It's going to have negative impacts on your clients, and nobody wants that. That's not a good work environment that anybody wants to be in. So instead, I would focus on, creating a positive work environment and reinforcement to retain your employees. So creating a culture of respect and inclusion where your employees feel valued, respected, and included in decisions, that can be very valuable to keeping keeping employees still employed at your company. And with that, I think having a good work life balance is really important. Having flexible work hours, the ability to do remote work when possible, encouraging people to actually take their vacation and have those boundaries between their work time and their personal life is really important to make sure that people are not getting burnt out in their work and then deciding to leave and go somewhere else. Also, utilizing reinforcements in your place of employment are really important. And a lot of times we think about, salary and bonuses and those monetary reinforcements, but it doesn't have to just be, giving them extra money for things. There's a lot of ways that we can utilize reinforcement and recognize and reward employees that are doing a good job, and that is our job, as behavior analysts. We do this with our clients. So we want to make sure we have systems in place to do this with our employees as well and make sure that we are reinforcing behaviors that we want to see. And that's going to help foster loyalty with your company and create a company culture that people want to stay and be a part of. And then also investing in professional development. So, in our field, it's really important that we stay on top of current research and, current methods of providing therapy. So, making sure that employees have a way to access training and education and that they can advance their careers while still staying employed in your company is going to be a big benefit to want people to continue to work at your company without forcing them to work there with a non compete. So, all of those things are definitely things that you can think about. Look at your company's structure and see how you can adjust things and maybe reorganize things to utilize positive aspects of your company to keep people there and to increase employee loyalty, as opposed to those negative aspects such as non-compete agreements, which of course are no longer a tool that anybody can use. So, this banning of non compete agreements, I think that this is really beneficial for our field as a whole, but also for anybody that's working out there in the workforce that's no longer going to be held by these restrictive legal contracts that are not allowing them to, work where they want to and work in jobs that they want to with companies that they enjoy working for. So, this is really great. I would love to hear your thoughts or your experiences on this topic. So, definitely reach out to me. You can reach out via email, comment below, and share your feedback with me because I would love to hear what your situation is. And if you have any questions on it, like I said, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to hear from any of you. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that this gave you some new information on this really exciting new ban from the FTC, and I will see you next time. Thank you.